Every holiday hides a lie. Behind the fireworks, tinsel, and candy hearts are stories twisted by marketing, politics, and centuries of lazy myths. Today, we're tearing through 40 of the most famous facts about your favorite holidays and showing how much of what we celebrate is pure, glitter-coated fiction. 1. You probably think Mother's Day was created by greeting card companies as a stroke of commercial genius. The truth is far more tragic. The holiday's founder, Anna Jarvis, envisioned it as a sincere day of personal connection, not a commercial free-for-all. When she saw corporations hijacking her idea with pre-made cards and overpriced candy, she declared war. Jarvis spent her entire inheritance fighting the very industries that profited from her creation, organizing boycotts and getting arrested for protesting. She died nearly penniless and in poor health, bitterly regretting that she ever started the holiday. The ultimate irony? The floral and greeting card industries secretly paid for her care in her final years. 2. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Time to grab a margarita and celebrate Mexican Independence Day, right? Not even close. You're celebrating the wrong holiday. Mexico's actual Independence Day is September 16th. Cinco de Mayo commemorates a single unlikely victory against the French Empire at the Battle of Puebla in 1862. It was a morale booster, but France went on to capture Mexico City a year later anyway. The irony? The holiday is a much bigger deal in the United States, where beer companies in the 1980s promoted it heavily to sell more products. So you're not celebrating Mexican freedom, you're participating in a brilliant decades-old marketing campaign. 3. The term Black Friday comes from the day retailers finally go into the black for the year, turning a profit. This is a wonderfully sanitized piece of corporate revisionism. The term was actually coined by Philadelphia police officers in the 1950s to describe the day after Thanksgiving. For them, it was the darkest day of the year. A chaotic mess of massive traffic jams, overcrowded sidewalks, shoplifting spikes, and scuffles as crowds surged for discounts. It was a term of pure dread. Retailers hated the name for decades until they realized they couldn't beat it, and instead leaned into the chaos, rebranding a day of urban misery into the official start of the holiday shopping season. 4. Labor Day in the United States is seen as a well-earned day off, a tribute to the American worker gifted by a grateful nation. In reality, it was a desperate act of political damage control. In 1894, during the violent Pullman Railroad strike, President Grover Cleveland sent federal troops to crush the Union, resulting in the deaths of dozens of workers. Facing a national firestorm of outrage, Cleveland and Congress rushed to pass legislation creating Labor Day just 6 days after the strike ended. It wasn't a gesture of gratitude. It was a panicked peace offering to an enraged working class. It was less a "thank you for your hard work" and more a "please don't burn the country down" bribe. 5. The story of the first Thanksgiving we all learned in school paints a rosy picture. Friendly pilgrims and Native Americans sharing a feast out of mutual respect and budding friendship. The reality was less a heartwarming dinner party and more a high-stakes diplomatic summit born of mutual desperation. The Wampanoag tribe didn't just show up for a friendly meal. They were a powerful nation, and their leader, Massasoit, saw the struggling, disease-ridden pilgrims as a potential pawn in his conflict with rival tribes. The pilgrims, in turn, desperately needed an alliance to survive. That famous meal wasn't the start of a beautiful friendship. It was a fragile political maneuver that would soon crumble into conflict. 6. The wholesome image of kids trick-or-treating is adorable, but its origins are closer to a shakedown. In medieval Europe, the practice was known as souling, where the poor would go door-to-door on Hallowmas, begging for soul cakes. In exchange, they promised to pray for the homeowner's dead relatives. It was a morbid transaction. Give us bread, or your Uncle Barry's soul gets another century in purgatory. Later versions involved guising, where young people would perform tricks for treats, with the unspoken threat of mischief if the household didn't pay up. So, every Halloween, your kids are unknowingly continuing a long tradition of what is essentially spiritual extortion and low-stakes blackmail. 7. Every nativity scene features the same three guys, the three wise men, or three kings, arriving to see the baby Jesus. Let's dismantle this entirely. First, the Bible never specifies there were three. It only mentions three gifts. There could have been 2 rich guys or a dozen of them in a caravan. Second, they weren't kings. They were Magi, a caste of Zoroastrian priests known for astrology. And most importantly, they were famously late to the scene. The scripture implies they arrived when Jesus was a toddler living in a house, not a newborn in a manger. So the real story is a handful of astrologers showing up a year or two late, with deeply impractical gifts. Gold is fine, but frankincense and myrrh, a funeral embalming resin, is a profoundly weird baby shower gift. 8. You can't imagine St. Patrick's Day without a heaping plate of corned beef and cabbage, the quintessential Irish meal. Except it's not Irish at all. In Ireland, the traditional celebratory meal was boiled bacon or pork. Cows were prized for dairy, not meat. But when Irish immigrants flooded into New York City, they were often living in poor neighborhoods alongside Jewish communities. There, they discovered their new favorite butcher shops, Jewish delis. The brisket used to make corned beef was a cheap and delicious substitute for the pork they couldn't afford. They paired it with cabbage, the cheapest vegetable around, and a new tradition was born. It's a culinary lie of convenience that became an unbreakable American staple. 9. That iconic image of all the Founding Fathers bravely signing the Declaration of Independence on July 4th is a complete fabrication designed for dramatic effect. The Continental Congress actually voted for independence on July 2nd. On July 4th, they simply approved the final wording of the document. The famous, elegant copy wasn't even written until weeks later. The signing itself was a drawn-out bureaucratic process that started on August 2nd and continued for months as delegates trickled in to add their names. It was less a single moment of defiant unity and more a long, drawn-out administrative headache, like trying to get everyone in the office to sign a birthday card. 10. Rudolph the Red-Nosed. Reindeer feels like a piece of Christmas folklore as ancient as Santa himself. He's not. He's a corporate mascot invented in 1939 by a department store. Robert L. May, a copywriter for Montgomery Ward, created the character for a free coloring book giveaway to attract holiday shoppers. His bosses initially rejected the idea, worried that a red nose would be associated with chronic alcoholism. May, whose wife was dying of cancer at the time, persisted and poured his own feelings of being an outcast into the story. The character was a massive hit. But because he created it as a work for hire, May didn't own the rights. He only gained the copyright years later, nearly broke and struggling to pay medical debts. 11. That chubby, diaper-clad baby shooting heart-tipped arrows on Valentine's Day cards? He used to be a terrifyingly powerful and chaotic Greek god. Originally known as Eros, he wasn't a cute cherub, but a handsome and dangerous youth who embodied overwhelming passion. His arrows didn't just spark sweet romance. They inflicted uncontrollable, often destructive desire that could topple kingdoms and ruin lives. He was a primordial force of nature, not a cuddly mascot for a greeting card company. His transformation into the harmless infantile Cupid we know today is one of history's biggest PR makeovers, turning a formidable deity into a character safe enough for a kindergarten classroom. 12. Hanukkah is often lazily referred to as Jewish Christmas, a cozy 8-day festival of lights and gifts. This comparison is not only inaccurate, but insulting to its origins. Hanukkah commemorates a hard-won revolt and military victory. It celebrates the Maccabean Revolt, an uprising of Jewish rebels against the Seleucid Empire, which was trying to forcibly eradicate their culture and religion. The holiday is about reclaiming a desecrated temple and resisting forced cultural assimilation, including on the battlefield. The modern emphasis on gift-giving was largely an American invention to help Jewish kids feel less left out during the Christmas season. So it's less a story of holiday cheer and more a tale of successful religious insurgency. 13. Remember, the 5th of November. In the UK, Fawkes Night is a beloved tradition of bonfires and spectacular fireworks. It's presented as a fun, family-friendly event. What you're actually celebrating is the anniversary of a failed terrorist plot and the subsequent brutal, state-sanctioned execution of the conspirators. The holiday commemorates the failure of the 1605 gunpowder plot, a Catholic conspiracy to blow up Parliament. Guy Fawkes and his co-conspirators were publicly tried and executed in ways the Crown used to make examples of dissidents. The bonfires originally burned effigies of the Pope and later Fawkes himself. So, you're not just watching pretty lights, you're participating in a sanitized, centuries-old festival that glorifies political vengeance. 14. St. Patrick famously drove all the snakes out of Ireland. This is perhaps the greatest accomplishment ever credited to someone for a problem that never existed. The truth is, Ireland never had snakes to begin with. The fossil record shows no evidence of native snakes on the island, ever. The icy waters surrounding Ireland during and after the last ice age made it impossible for them to migrate there from Britain or Europe. The snakes are now widely believed to be a metaphor for the pagan religions and druidic practices that Patrick helped supplant with Christianity. Claiming he drove out literal snakes just sounds way cooler and requires a lot less theological explanation. It's the ultimate resume padding. 15. Jack-o'-lanterns have always been carved from big orange pumpkins. The pumpkin is a New World celebrity that only got the jack-o'-lantern gig when the tradition immigrated to America. The original Irish and Scottish custom involved carving spooky faces into much humbler and frankly creepier vegetables, turnips, potatoes, and even beets. These original lanterns were tied to the legend of Stingy Jack, a man cursed to roam the earth with only a burning coal inside a carved-out turnip to light his way. When Irish immigrants arrived in the U.S., they found that the native pumpkin was larger and much easier to carve than a tough, gnarled turnip. It wasn't about tradition, it was just a much-needed and convenient upgrade. 16. President's Day is widely seen as a wholesome holiday, honoring all U.S. presidents, a day for patriotic reflection. That's a lie of commercial convenience. The federal holiday is, and always has been, officially designated as Washington's birthday. The shift in public consciousness to the generic President's Day was pushed by retailers in the 1980s. They saw the potential of a 3-day weekend in the dead of winter and marketed it as a massive sales event. The holiday wasn't broadened out of respect for Lincoln or Roosevelt. It was diluted to sell you a discounted mattress. 17. Let's get one thing straight. Bunnies don't lay eggs. The fact that we have a holiday mascot who is a biological impossibility should have been a red flag. The Easter Bunny actually hopped out of pagan folklore. He's believed to be the sidekick of Eostre, the Germanic goddess of spring and fertility. Legend says she once turned a bird into a hare, which, as a bizarre magical side effect, could still lay eggs. Early Christians, in their ongoing campaign to rebrand every pagan festival, saw the rabbits and eggs as powerful symbols of fertility and new life and just sort of awkwardly mashed them together. We've been pretending a magical egg-laying mammal makes sense ever since. 18. Columbus Day wasn't created to honor a navigator's questionable achievements. It was born from a horrific act of violence and a desperate political calculation. A deadly 1891 New Orleans attack on Italian immigrants sparked a diplomatic crisis with Italy and fueled anti-immigrant sentiment. To appease outraged Italian Americans and score political points, President Benjamin Harrison declared a one-time national observance of Columbus Day in 1892. It was a strategic move to offer a symbol of Italian pride as a form of reparations and secure a voting bloc. The holiday's roots are not in discovery, but in racial violence and political damage control. 19. The song The 12 Days of Christmas is rumored to be a secret catechism song, a clever code for persecuted English Catholics to teach their children about their faith. It's a romantic story of defiance and secret knowledge. It's also almost certainly complete nonsense. Historians have found no evidence to support this theory. The song's real origin is far more mundane. It was likely a children's memory and forfeit game, the kind you'd play at a party. The increasingly ridiculous list of gifts was just a way to trip players up. So, the song isn't a symbol of religious perseverance. It's the 18th century equivalent of a drinking game that got out of hand. 20. The Christmas tree is the ultimate symbol of Christian holiday cheer. Except for the inconvenient fact that for centuries, Christianity viewed it as a stubbornly persistent pagan ritual they couldn't stamp out. Evergreen trees and wreaths were used by ancient Egyptians, Romans, and Druids to celebrate the winter solstice, symbolizing eternal life. Early church leaders condemned the practice as heathen idolatry. It took the star power of Queen Victoria, famously sketched with her family's tree for the Illustrated London News in 1848, to finally make the tradition fashionable. The church couldn't beat the pagans, so they just absorbed their decorations. 21. The story of Betsy Ross sewing the first American flag is a cornerstone of national mythology. George Washington himself supposedly commissioned her for the job. It's a tale of humble female patriotism. It's also a complete fantasy. There is zero historical evidence, no letters, no journals, no government records to support this claim. The story was invented out of whole cloth by her grandson, William Canby, nearly a century after the fact, in a pitch to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania. The real designer was likely Francis Hopkinson, a signer of the Declaration, who actually sent a bill to Congress for his design work. The Betsy Ross tale is just a family story that became a national lie because it was too good to fact-check. 22. Saint Valentine, the supposed patron saint of love, is the man of the hour every February 14th. There's just one tiny problem. Nobody is entirely sure who he was. The historical record is a confusing mess of at least 3 different martyred individuals named Valentinus. The stories are so vague and contradictory that in 1969, the Catholic Church basically threw up its hands and removed him from the general Roman calendar, admitting they couldn't verify his life story or even his existence. So every year, the world spends billions of dollars on cards and candy to honor a man so obscure that even the Vatican has officially given up on him. 23. That waxy, tricolored pyramid of sugar known as candy corn is a pillar of Halloween, whether you love it or despise it. But its original branding was far less appetizing. When it was invented in the 1880s, it was marketed under the catchy name Chicken Feed. Sold in a box with a rooster on the front, it was designed to appeal to America's agricultural roots by looking like kernels of corn for livestock. It was a novel idea at the time, but the fact remains that millions of people now eagerly consume a confection that was literally branded as poultry food. It's not just a candy, it's a testament to how a good marketing pivot can make people forget they're eating something designed for chickens. 24. Every February 2nd, the entire nation turns its attention to a large rodent in Pennsylvania to determine the future of our weather. And nobody stops to ask, why are we letting a groundhog dictate our seasons? This tradition is a folklore-light adaptation of a German custom where they used a badger, a significantly more respectable animal, to predict spring. When German immigrants settled in Pennsylvania, there were no badgers, so they settled for the next best thing, a fat, hibernating woodchuck. The fact that Punxsutawney Phil's accuracy rate is famously terrible doesn't matter. We've collectively agreed to trust a glorified squirrel's reaction to its own shadow. It's not a tradition, it's a national commitment to sheer absurdity. 25. Coca-Cola invented the modern image of Santa Claus in a red suit. While the company's 1930s ad campaigns certainly cemented this version of Santa in our collective consciousness, they were just jumping on a sleigh that was already moving. The jolly, red-suited, white-bearded figure was a common sight decades earlier. Artists like Thomas Nast had been drawing him for magazines like Harper's Weekly since the 1860s, solidifying his image as a cheerful, round man from the North Pole. Coca-Cola didn't invent him. They just hired the best brand ambassador of all time, one who was already beloved and conveniently worked for free. They saw a good thing, put a Coke in his hand, and the rest is advertising history. 26. Kwanzaa is often mistakenly believed to be an ancient African harvest festival, a tradition carried across continents for centuries. This couldn't be further from the truth. Kwanzaa is a modern American creation. It was established in 1966 by Dr. Maulana Karenga, a professor and activist in California. He designed it as a non-religious, pan-African holiday to give Black Americans a way to celebrate their heritage and community, distinct from the dominant culture. Its origins are not in ancient Africa, but in the Black Power movement of the 1960s. It's not an ancient relic. It's a powerful and intentional act of modern cultural creation. 27. The annual White House tradition of pardoning a turkey seems like a heartwarming display of presidential mercy. In reality, it's a relatively modern and utterly bizarre piece of political theater. Presidents had been gifted turkeys for decades, most of which they ate. The idea of a formal pardon was a PR stunt that solidified under George H.W. Bush in 1989. Now, it's a full-blown ceremony where one incredibly lucky bird is saved in a televised event, giving the nation a moment of collective relief before it proceeds with the consumption of approximately 46 million of the bird's less fortunate relatives. It's not a tradition. It's a beautifully orchestrated distraction. 28. Every year, someone gets furious about the use of Xmas, convinced it's a secular plot to take the Christ out of Christmas. This outrage is a spectacular display of historical ignorance. The X is not the English letter X, it's the Greek letter chi, K, which is the first letter of Christ in Greek, Christos. For centuries, this X was used by religious scholars and scribes as a respected and common shorthand for Christ. So, the people who rage against Xmas are actually defending a modern, commercialized spelling against an ancient, Christ-centric abbreviation. The X comes from the chi in the ancient Christogram XP. 29. The story of the Liberty Bell cracking dramatically as it rang to announce the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, is a powerful symbol of American freedom. It's also a complete fabrication. The bell was not rung on that day, and it didn't get its famous crack until decades later, likely in the 1840s due to routine use. The heroic tale was invented in the mid-19th century by an abolitionist writer named George Lippard to create a potent symbol for the anti-slavery movement. It was a brilliant piece of historical revisionism that took a mundane maintenance issue and turned it into the defining moment of a nation's birth. 30. Father's Day seems like a natural and equal counterpart to Mother's Day. In reality, it was widely mocked at the time as overly sentimental and retail-driven. When it was first proposed in the early 20th century, men openly scoffed at the idea. Newspapers ran satirical articles, and for years Congress refused to make it official. It only gained traction after being heavily promoted as a manly holiday and linked to patriotism during World War II. It wasn't born from a desire to honor dads. It was a commercial idea that had to fight a long, awkward battle against its own target audience. 31. The symbol of the new year is a giant, sentient baby wearing a top hat and a sash. No one ever stops to question how deeply weird this is. This bizarre imagery is often traced to ancient Greek imagery tied to Dionysus and seasonal rebirth. Some sources describe processions featuring a symbolic New Year child. While the modern version is a cartoon, the original practice was probably far more unsettling, less a cute celebration, and more like a scene from a folk horror movie. It's a sanitized remnant of a pagan ritual that we now accept without a second thought. 32. While a significant portion of America argues about Columbus, most people are completely unaware that we have an official holiday for the guy who actually got here first. Leif Erikson Day has been a U.S. national observance by presidential proclamation since 1964, not a federal day off. Every October 9th, the U.S. government officially recognizes the Norse explorer who landed in North America nearly 500 years before Columbus was even born. But does it get a day off from work? Parades? Department store sales? No. It's the participation trophy of Discovery holidays. a quiet, awkward admission from the government that the other, much bigger holiday is based on historically inaccurate information. 33. Arbor Day is a noble holiday dedicated to environmentalism, a day for forward-thinking people to plant trees for the future of the planet. While that's what it has become, its origin was far more desperate and practical. The holiday was founded in 1872 by J. Sterling Morton in Nebraska. He wasn't a proto-environmentalist. He was a politician living in a vast, desolate, and completely treeless prairie. The goal wasn't to save the earth. It was to make the bleak, windswept landscape of Nebraska slightly less miserable by planting trees for windbreaks, fuel, and building materials. It was a holiday born not of idealism, but of sheer unglamorous necessity. 34. Flag Day, June 14th, feels like a holiday as old as the flag itself, a bedrock of American patriotism. The truth is that for most of American history, nobody cared. The holiday exists almost entirely due to the obsessive, decades-long campaign of a single person, Bernard J. Sigrand, a Wisconsin schoolteacher. Starting in 1885, he relentlessly petitioned newspapers, presidents, and civic groups to make it a national holiday. He was largely ignored. It wasn't until 1949, long after Sigrand's death, that President Truman finally signed it into law. Flag Day wasn't born from a groundswell of national pride. It was the pet project of one very persistent man that finally got approved after everyone else just got tired of hearing about it. 35. April Fool's Day is built on a foundation of pure mockery. The most widely accepted theory traces it back to 16th century France, which switched from the Julian calendar, where the new year started around April 1st, to the Gregorian calendar, starting January 1st. People who were slow to get the news or stubbornly refused to change were considered fools. Pranksters would stick paper fish on their backs and call them poisson d'avril, April fish. So the entire holiday is based on making fun of people who didn't update their system software. It's a tradition born from the passive-aggressive joy of shaming those who can't keep up with the times. 36. Many Americans assume Boxing Day is a quirky British holiday about the sport of boxing, or perhaps returning unwanted gifts in their original boxes. The reality is a stark reminder of a rigid class system. Observed on December 26th, it was the one day of the year when the wealthy were expected to give their servants and tradespeople a Christmas box containing money, gifts, or leftover food. It wasn't an act of genuine charity, it was a transactional, almost feudal obligation. Think of it as an annual society-wide bonus, handed out with a palpable sense of, here's your box of scraps for a year of service, now get back to work. 37. Ever wonder why Christmas is on December 25th? It's certainly not because anyone had a birth certificate. The Bible is completely silent on the date of Jesus' birth, with many scholars suggesting it was likely in the spring. The real reason for the date is that the early church likely aligned the feast with popular solstice festivals, effectively absorbing existing winter celebrations. They were struggling to stamp out wildly popular Roman pagan festivals like Saturnalia and Sol Invictus, which celebrated the winter solstice. By placing Jesus' birth in the same time frame, they co-opted the festivities and rebranded the whole season. 38. Many people see Mardi Gras as a chaotic, week-long excuse for hedonism centered in New Orleans. But the entire spectacle of excess is pointless without understanding what comes next. 40 days of extreme religious austerity. Fat Tuesday is the final frantic purge of earthly pleasures before the fasting and repentance of Lent begins on Ash Wednesday. The debauchery isn't just a party, it's a psychologically necessary release valve. You are cramming as much indulgence and excess as humanly possible into a single day because you're about to enter a period of profound self-denial. It's not a celebration of freedom. It's the last meal of a condemned man. 39. You might encounter Sweetest Day on a calendar and assume it's a lesser-known, gentler version of Valentine's Day. You'd be giving it far too much credit. This holiday is a monument to corporate audacity. It was fabricated in 1922 by a committee of candy manufacturers in Cleveland, Ohio. Their stated goal was to create a new occasion to boost confectionery sales during the slow autumn period. They disguised their commercial ambitions with a flimsy story about giving candy to orphans and the underprivileged. It wasn't born from a heartfelt tradition. It was conceived in a boardroom as a pure, unapologetic cash grab. 40. New Year's resolutions feel like a modern obsession, a product of our self-help, gym membership culture. You'd be wrong by about 4,000 years. The tradition dates back to the ancient Babylonians, who made promises to their gods at the start of each year, hoping to earn their favor. They'd promise to pay off debts and return borrowed farm equipment. The Romans did it too, making promises to the god Janus. This means that failing to live up to your resolutions isn't a modern weakness. It is one of humanity's oldest, most consistent, and most time-honored traditions. We have been lying to ourselves and a higher power about going to the gym since the dawn of civilization. So now you know, your favorite holidays are built on half-truths, PR stunts, and ancient propaganda dressed in sparkle. But tell me this, if knowing the truth made your holidays less magical, would you still celebrate them? Drop your thoughts below. And if you love uncomfortable truths wrapped in humor, hit like and subscribe for more.